Hello again, and welcome to Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Tonight, this afternoon, there's a special edition. We're going to be speaking about the June 7th planned protest. That's the Save the State protest that is organized and planned by the Coalition of Patriots to be staged on June 7th. With me to discuss this, I've invited two distinct personalities. But before I get to those personalities, I want to welcome my guest co-host, Mr. Fidel C.T. Booty. Mr. Booty, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a big pleasure for me to be here today, and I'm looking forward to a good show.
All right. And Mr. Booty is a Liberian, of course, a postgraduate researcher with both the Global Rural Project at Aberystwyth University, as well as the Wales Institute of Social and Economic Research, Data and Methods. Fidel is also a postgraduate fellow of the Royal Geographical Society with IBG and a member of the Center for Welsh Politics and Society. Once again, Fidel, welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is your first time being our guest host. It's my pleasure having you.
Yes, my pleasure being here as well.
How's the UK? And by the way, Fidel is stationed in the UK.
Yeah, the UK. I'm actually in Aberystwyth at the moment in mid Wales, and it's nice. The weather outside is good. It's a bit warm. We don't usually get warm weather here, so when we do, we are quite excited.
I'm excited too. We also have as our guest tonight, Mr. Josiah Flomo Joekai. Joekai, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure having me here on your show. It is my very first time, and I'm looking forward to a very good conversation, one that would be meaningful to all of us, to our people back home and in the diaspora.
Thank you. And by the way, Josiah is a Liberian writer and a development practitioner with expertise in elections, education, and security administration. He is an inspirational speaker and a social justice advocate. In 2005, he received an award for outstanding service as a presenter during the Great Gathering of the African Descent Lutherans in the Americas, an association of Liberian Lutherans in the Americas that took place in Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States. He's also an author and is married and blessed with 3 boys. As I understand, Josiah, you also contested for the House of Representatives. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, I did. I contested the seat of District number 3 in Montserrat County. I was one of the 17 candidates, interestingly, in the 2017 legislative and presidential elections. At least I appreciate the fact that I participated and I left an impression on the minds of the people in terms of understanding their roles, rights, and responsibility when it comes to being a citizen of a country. So I think I made an impact, although I didn't win, but I think there's a lot that I learned from them in the process, and they too learned from me. And I think establishes the basis for what we do tomorrow.
And I'm proud of you. That's a big job. If you go do it, I respect those who contest. Also, we are waiting for one more guest. That's Mr. Wilmot Cooney. Mr. Cooney is the former president of ULA, that's the Union of Liberian Associations in the Americas. He's also the founder and president of a newly established organization called Liberian Diaspora Political Action Committee. Mr. Cooney will be joining us in a moment. Tonight, we're going to talk about the June 7th protest. And before we start talking about the specifics of the protest, I will go to my guest co-host, Mr. Booty, so we can ask our guests, let's establish the framework and the basis before we begin our discussion. Mr. Booty, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So first of all, Mr. Joekai, welcome to the show again from my end, from the UK.
Thank you.
I think it's a pleasure to have you here, especially with your expertise and experience in understanding society in Liberia, having contested the 2017 representative elections in Montserrat County. I think for me, the question I would like to start off with, which I believe that a lot of our brethren and countrymen will want to get some understanding of, is if you can first of all just tell us briefly about yourself. Obviously Dennis talked a little bit about you, but it's always nice to hear from you. Tell us about the organization that you're with and what your mission and vision is, and kind of the governance structure and when the organization was established, if that is something that you would like to share.
Right. Thank you, Fidel. Again, let me begin by saying it is a great honor for me to be a guest on your show. Not many Liberians or other personalities will have such great opportunities. So I find this to be a blessing for me. My full name is Josiah Joekai Jr., as Dennis indicated from the start of the conversation. I am a Liberian. I actually have been involved in the public sector for some time, a little over 15 years. I work in the education sector, specifically at the Ministry of Education, providing technical support to ensure that the ministry achieve its mandate. And I was glad, to be a part of a team that helped with the transformation of positioning the education sector. After the war in Liberia, we participated in the development of the 10-year education sector plan, from which all education policies were developed. I was glad to be a part of rolling it out. I can tell you for sure that that plan was very comprehensive. It's going to expire in 2020. We're not short of policies in Liberia as far as transforming the education sector is concerned, but it has to do with the will of those responsible for education governance to ensure the implementation of those policies and programs that have been established. While they're also under the auspices of UNICEF, I had an opportunity to develop all of the program frameworks for the implementation of the National Policy on Girls' Education, which was launched by President Salif when she took over in 2006. That was done on a special contract provided by UNICEF. And I was able to do a rapid assessment of the implementation process and realize the gaps, in the implementation process in terms of roles and responsibilities of different actors, and how there was a need to build synergies to ensure that there is efficiency and effectiveness in the delivery of the outcomes. So that established the basis for many of the gender parity programs that are taking place in Liberia today. So I'm glad I was a part of that. I was never appointed by any president at the Ministry of Education, no. I serve in the background, providing support in that respect. I actually had an opportunity to help manage the office of the Minister of Education, but that was not long when I was called over to the National Elections Commission, where I spent 5 years, not only doing elections in Liberia, but also helping to provide technical support to electoral commissions in some countries in the sub-region. I was one of the 10 persons selected during Ghana's critical election in 2012 from West Africa to investigate whether or not Ghana was ready for elections. And we did that successfully. We did a very good recommendation that led to helping to safeguard Ghana's enviable democracy. I also helped to straighten some of the contradictions when it came to understanding the electoral jurisdictions of the 4 countries in the MRU. In 2012, I was invited by the United Nations Office for West Africa, where they brought all the 4 electoral commissions, and I did like almost 2-hour presentations on elections management, and how they relate to electoral violence. That was helpful in making them understand some of the legal reform in the electoral process in their respective countries. I can just give you some specifics. If you look at Guinea, for example, they are still heavily politically committed in the sense that you have government institutions that are directly providing electoral services, like, for example, the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And these are agencies that operate strictly at the will and pleasure of the president. So when you're talking about,
sorry, Mr. Jack, I'm just going to stop you just 1 minute because you talked about in your experience, some of the words that are jumping out to me. You talk about clarity, you talk about understanding, and I think one of the things that we, Dennis and I will want to get from you today is to help us as Liberians understand certain developments that are going on in our country right now. So, Dennis, I don't know whether you want to jump in here and just ask the question, that kind of leads on that flow.
Go ahead, Fidel. You are rolling right now.
Because the thing is, you're nailing all of the things that I want to hear, and I just want to throw another question so that you can add that to the conversation as you go on, if you don't mind.
The point I was trying to make was to let you know some of the things that I've been involved with prior to coming to the specifics, probably because there are a few other things that I'd like to talk about further.
Oh, yeah.
Just in the next 2-3 minutes about my role,
all right, yeah. So, sorry, continue. Yes. I just didn't want to forget, but continue,
but
please.
I will hope you note it. If you note that down, then we can come back to it. I'm here to take any questions.
Okay, yeah. So, sorry, I continue, please.
Right. So we were involved, in making sure that we let those countries know. And for Cote d'Ivoire, the major problem they had that led to the electoral violence that concerned every one of us at the time was because of the ambiguity in their legal framework. And it still stands. One of the recommendations I made to them at that high-level meeting, because it was organized actually by the United Nations office in Sierra Leone, and implemented by the United Nations Office for West Africa. And I was invited as the lead discussant to talk about those issues. So I said to them, the best thing to do is to do a comprehensive legal framework of their electoral system. And one of the key areas to look at is not to give the power, to the Supreme Court to be able to release the key election results, because you can't have one body delivering the elections and another body that has nothing to do with the delivery of the elections announcing the results, so that's conflict right there. And that was one of the key recommendations that I made to them. For Sierra Leone, at that time, they have 55% absolute majority. And I said to them, just 1% of the election, how many votes that constitute. So that alone is not a pressure just on the candidates in the election, but it's also a pressure on the Electoral Commission. 55% you must earn as a candidate to get the absolute majority. So what was working conventionally at the time was the 50%. If you get 50% plus one vote, like in the case of Liberia, that's our absolute majority framework. And many other countries subscribe to that in the sub-region. So I was recommending that to them. So I played that role in 2012, and they carried me back as the head of the MRAU Election Observation Mission, where I also play a key role working along with Dr. Sawyer, with Yvette Chessin, and the rest of the people. Dr. Fatah Musa of ECOWAS, we have to get Sierra Leone stabilized after their 2012 election.
Sorry.
Yes, I've also worked, with Guinea. Their last presidential election, I was there, in fact, almost for 3 weeks, helping the Electoral Commission to help organize the election during the 11th hour. And I remained there for post-election engagement, because there was electoral violence really emerging in a serious way. People were being killed. Traps were at each other. So I had to stay there for post-election engagement and help to quiet down the situation. Back in Liberia, I've been involved with elections from 2010. I helped to organize many of the by-elections, and then the presidential election of 2011. We were all involved. We apply our expertise in the way we could to help strengthen our democracy in our country. And I think whatever contributions we made pay off in helping to show to the world that we were maturing as far as managing our own elections were concerned. So And it was on the basis of that some of us had an opportunity to be called under the auspices of these regional and international bodies to share our experiences in other countries. I also work in the security sector from 2016 to 2018 with the Liberia National Commission on Small Arms. It was during that time that we were able to establish for the first time in Liberia a comprehensive regime on arms management in our country. Right now we have laws governing arms in our country, the security sector. We have laws. From those laws, we have policies on PSSM. In fact, I relinquished my position as the focal point on physical security and stockpile management in Liberia. And I had an opportunity to do that specialized training in Germany, in Galikachi and Berlin. ECOWAS also recommended me for that. So I was responsible to help develop programs and recommend to security development institutions on how they can help to support Liberia's arm management regime. So we have contributed to a large extent, like I said, in the background, not appointed by any president, always vetted, you know.
That. But let's with your background, let's go now and as Bodhi was saying, Fidel was saying, for also begin to lay the premise, because you have experience in all these areas. So talk to us about this whole idea, this whole concept of protest. Sometimes they are world choice or what, but we have protests, you have demonstration, you have riots, you have march. Help us understand, give us the clarity on these kind of things, and how do they form part of our democratic process?
Right. Interestingly, if you take the word protest in the context of our conversation, and you firstly want to establish what it is, you have to go back to what the books say about protest. If you take the different lexicon definitions, there are certain words that remain constant. No matter what dictionary you take, certain words remain constant. People showing their disapproval for policies, people showing objection to programs, to laws, and these are instruments that govern them to ensure their well-being. So when they feel that that is not guaranteed, it is their responsibility to ensure that they call the authorities. It could be the government of a country, it could be the leadership of a given organization, it could be a community grouping, the authority of that grouping, and the people demonstrating their objection, demonstrating their disapproval to the way they are being governed. And there should be specifics in that regards to show that they either are being governed wrongly or that the authority in question, whether or not government or leadership of an organization, is not conducting itself in keeping to their hopes and aspirations. And so protest is the mother word, is the umbrella word. So how do people protest? People protest in various forms. There are some people who show their disapproval by remaining silent, by putting up an uncooperative attitude, but not by any public demonstrative action, but just that causes violence, but just to do a sitting action is a protest. A sitting action, you're saying nothing to anybody. You just assemble at a particular place and sit there to attract the attention of the authority concerned. That's a protest. Or to be able to mobilize the citizens, if it is a country, or the members, if it is an organization, to mobilize them to rise up by either standing before the offices of those in authority, preventing them from exercising the responsibility they've been entrusted with. That's a protest. And that particular action is what we refer to as demonstration. So demonstration comes under the umbrella word protests. There are those who also will decide to go on hunger strike. That's a form of protest. They just decide and say they're not going to eat for a particular period until the government can change certain policies, until the government can meet certain demands. And if the government is sensitive and believe in the individual security and well-being of their citizens, that particular government or organization will have to see it as a responsibility to ensure that that person is heard, or that person's concern, or those people concerned are addressed. So the issue of protest comes, in essence, when there are policies that the people disapprove of, when there are plans and programs that the people object to, when their leadership, whether or not a government or an organization, is not performing to their expectation, they can express concern, and that concern could be in the form of their disapproval, could be in the form of their objection, could be in the form of their rejection. So in essence, that is protest. But on the other hand, why should people protest? Is it something that should happen? I'm sure that's the next question that you want to ask.
And I like the way you're going with this, and it's very clear. I'm sure our viewers tune into the show today, Liberians across the world and non-Liberians who are interested in the topic that we're having, can see clearly the extensive nature of your experience when it comes to building democratic institutions. And I like it, but I just want to ask two questions while you're going on to the explain the next few things about what protest is. And the first one is, when you look at your background in terms of how you've worked tirelessly to improve democracies across our sub-region and within the West African bloc, how significant for you is a protest, or the ability or the concept of protesting for citizens within a democracy? And then to add on to that, within the framework of Liberia, what would you say in terms of the lawfulness or the legality of protesting within our constitution?
Okay, so those are pertinent questions as far as the conversation is concerned. I must acknowledge that, Fidel. Because firstly, we need to establish the rationale for protest, whether or not it is important as far as the authority of the citizens is concerned. So in a given democracy such as ours, and we cannot discuss that void of our decision to subscribe to the form of governance that we refer to as democracy. Because democracy provides that the people must be the one with the power. Power is inherent in them. They make the sole decision as to how they should be governed. And that is why they exercise their authority by setting aside a special group of their citizens like them and entrust them with the mandate to lead them. So and that is also guaranteed by our Constitution. Article 1 is guaranteed by Article 1 of the Liberian Constitution that all power is inherent in the people. And and the people have the authority to alter that when they feel that their safety is no longer guaranteed. The Constitution provides for that. So in the framework of democracy, and that's how our Constitution supports this whole system of governance called democracy, because democracy is about the people, it's for the people. It's not just about throwing out words, about the people, because it is the people that have the power, not the few that are selected to govern them. So it's about them. That's why it's about them. It's for the people because it's for them to be able to hold their government accountable to deliver upon the mandate which they have entrusted them with. And Liberia subscribes to all of these principles. And that's why we try to boast about being a democratic nation, even though we are still in the embryonic stage. Our democracy is a nascent one, you know, that is still developing like many other sub-Saharan countries. But to come to the issue of the rationale or the legitimacy of protests, my answer would be a resounding yes. A group of people in a democracy, they have the right to protest. But the government must always ensure that the basis for their election must be accomplished, must be achieved. When the people go to cast their ballot, when Fidel is casting his ballot for Joekai, an example, Fidel didn't vote for me anyway, for the sake of the record. He was not even there to do that.
I wasn't even registered to vote.
If Fidel goes to the box to do that, Fidel is now voting for the handsomeness of Joekai or the ugliness of Joekai. Fidel is voting because Joekai has assured him that under his leadership, he will be able to ensure his well-being by making education affordable, accessible, by making sure that Joekai will be able to participate in the economy at his level. If he has the power to invest in the economy, he should be able to do that, and Fidel has a responsibility to create the enabling environment for that. That Joekai will be, Joekai rather, not Fidel, Joekai will be able to guarantee the health of Joekai and his family. That is why Fidel is voting for Joekai. That Joekai will be able to establish relations with the rest of the members of the Committee of Nations to ensure that Joekai gets a good image so that the citizens of Joekai's country will be proud people that will move in and out of Liberia without any fear or embarrassment. That Joekai will have security, not security guaranteed by the number of persons carrying weapons, arms, and ammunition, but economic security. That Joekai is able to go to bed knowing that at the end of the week or at the end of the month, he has an income, that he is able to cater for the needs of his family. So in the democracy, when those things, when the leadership entrusted with the mandate fails to ensure that those things are guaranteed under the laws and in keeping with democratic principles, the citizens who have the power, they have the right to demonstrate to their government that the way you are proceeding with our mandate is wrong. And one of the ways they can show their disapproval is one of the many ways I have suggested, that either they do it through hunger strike, or either they assemble in public places to express to the government their objection to the policies of the government, their disapproval of the government's performance, and every way possible. Those could be demonstrations to show that. So in our democracy, in our system of governance, yes, protest is allowed and should be allowed.
All right. Just on that point, I don't know, I'll bring Dennis in just, so he can kind of tap into this experience of yours, obviously, and talk, maybe go back and ask some question that takes us a bit back and kind of break down our understanding of, because it's important, I think, for all of us Liberians, those of us in Liberia and those of us outside of Liberia, to understand why we have protests and why it's important for our democracy and why it's legal. So Dennis, I'll let you jump in here and ask a question to our guest, Mr.
You can. I'm liking it. Just flow.
All right. So anyway, so since Dennis want me keep flowing, let me flow, Mr. Joekai. And first of all, before I go on, I just want to say to our audience who are watching, thank you for tuning in. Today is a very interesting show. We've got Mr. Josiah F. Joekai Jr. with us. And he's a Liberian who is very experienced when it comes to building democratic institutions, helping to maintain those institutions, and why these different parts of our constitution must be respected, so that everyone can enjoy the good of the nation. So, Mr. Joekai, I think my next question, and I'm sure some Liberians who are younger would be glad that I've asked this question. And that's looking at, you've talked about the importance of protesting in our democracy. You've talked about the legality of it. That look, in not only is it legal, but it's also something that a government should encourage, because that way the people have a medium to speak to their leaders. Now, when we look at the history of Liberia, some of us were alive, some of us weren't, when protests were encouraged in Liberia when they first started happening in Liberia. So when we look at historically in Liberia, can you just tap into one or two examples of some big protests that have happened, what sparked those protests, and how those protests kind of shaped the conversation in Liberia, democratically, politically, economically, or whatever?
Right. I think again, we have to put this in a historical context. And I like the basis, you established. We have to know that Liberia was established by two groups of people with two distinct cultural and historical backgrounds. We had the free slaves who left from here in the United States, and we had the indigenous on the ground in Liberia. These two groups of people had different ideologies and different thoughts about each other. And I will tell you that one of the problems, the major problems we are having today in terms of our political leadership in our country is anchored on that division. And no one should be ashamed to talk about that. And the reason why it's like that is because successive governments since then, the establishment of our country, have failed to disabuse the minds of the two different groups of the insignificance of holding on to their ideologies. The so-called Americo-Liberian hegemony, and then the so-called indigenous independence claim. The failure of our successive governments to reorient the minds of the people has led to the people holding strongly onto these separate ideologies, divisions, and they've been very apprehensive about it. And I tell you why. I don't even want to go into the pre-days of William V.S. Tubman, but look at the rule of William V.S. Tubman, which you and I read about a little bit, and doesn't look to be mythical. So if you look at that, look at the way he governed. He was loved by the people, but he was loved out of what? Out of ignorance. Because what he actually exercised was a dictatorship form of government. But Tubman was being elected all the time. So every time they had election for Tubman, they said what? They said, we're going to have election for Tubman. The people will not say we're having election to even give recognition to other candidates. They say we're going to have election for Tubman because that was the orientation. So they knew that it's that one person that should be elected. So a classic example is the David Coleman case, the plot that failed. I know you read about that because he opposed Tubman. So what actually happened to David Coleman? He could not oppose Tubman because Tubman could not have any opposition by any means. So who could actually protest at that time? The first thing, there was no understanding about power being inherent in the people. No, you never had that. There was no understanding. Power was inherent in those that govern.
In the supreme president, yeah.
Not the govern, but those that govern.
Or probably they had that understanding, but they couldn't exercise it due to the repressive nature of the government, as you alluded to.
And that is the point. That is the, humanist principle. And I'm glad that Fidel is a researcher. It tells you, one of it tells you, I don't know the specific one, whether it's 2 or 3, humanist principle 2 or 3, but it tells you that anything you push against the wall produces a contrary reaction. Absolutely. And that built up for a longer period of time. You started coming to the 70s. And because of all of those repressive actions of the Tubman government and his likes in the past and everything, who became the victim of that situation? It was William V.S. Tubman. It was William V.S. Tubman. when he came to power, for him, he thought that opening up the government and making sure that he began the process of reorienting the minds of the Liberian people, that Liberia was a nation belonging to everyone, no matter where you came from, because that's what his policy was trying to show to the Liberian people, to demonstrate that there was a need for us to have one nation by one group of people, defined, by a particular cultural line, a particular cultural heritage. It didn't matter where you came from, even though there were some contradictions when it comes to
let me stop you right there. I want us
government.
Let me stop you right there. I want us to go to the specifics of the history of those protests and what they produced. We got a lot of.
I was coming to that.
Yeah, we got a lot of people. They are already making comments. They are asking you a lot of questions. So land on that so we can.
Right. So I will go in with the familiar one, and that we always talk about, the Rest Riot, in '79. It was the will of the people. It was the right of the people to protest. Their protests did not turn violent. It did not turn violent because they decided to make it violent. But it turned violent because there was reaction from the government, who failed to provide the security for the people to ensure that the protests, so that they could be heard. And so we always come with the notion that when there is protest, the backlashes will be that it is going to turn bloody, it's going to turn violent. But we need to have a different mindset, that when the people talk about protests, in fact, the government should be able to ensure that they welcome the action of the people as proposed, so that they are able to listen to the people, to be able to receive the position of the people when it comes to their disapproval. Because the more you suppress them, the more you do not allow them to speak on the issues that affect them, the more it becomes dangerous. It's like, a volcanic eruption, which mounts in the ground and builds tension before it erupts. And that's not what you want for a nation like Liberia, who is still struggling, to survive. So when you talk about that historical nature of it, we had a 1984 situation, move or be removed. That's an example. The student at the university campus, me campus, I had one of my uncles, Melvin, who died in the process. It was not the students who turned the thing into violence. It was the government at the day who turned it into violence when they reacted. It was a reaction of the government. So if you look at this from a historical context, protest in Liberia has been violent because of the reaction of the regime of the day, in short. It has not been about those who decide to protest.
All right, let me just jump in quickly here, because I like the way you're breaking it down, and obviously there's something, a question that I'm going to lead on to based on that those two examples that you've given. Now, obviously, last year we had some Liberians who were dissatisfied with this notion that we had $16 billion that disappeared. Mm-hmm. And those Liberians took to the street and protested. And it was under the regime of His Excellency President George Manning Weah. And at that time, in my opinion, it was seen as lawful. It was seen as accepted or acceptable that Liberians will go out in the street and protest. Now, I was reading yesterday in one of the news dailies in Liberia that the police director or commissioner or IG or whatever his title is, went in a public gathering and said in public that, look, Article 13 and Article 17 does not give Liberians the right to go and march in the street. It gave them the right to only assemble, and that he insinuated that marching in the street will be unlawful and illegal. And that could lead to a situation that could undermine the peace and stability of our country. Now, having talked about the 2 points that you just made, look, the protesters were non-violent, they just wanted to express their opinion. And having seen the example from last year that people were allowed to protest and it was considered legal and acceptable, what do you think of the statement of the IG now that, oh no, it's not legal anymore to march, even though the Constitution hasn't changed in any way, shape, or form, or we're not aware of it? What is your opinion on the IG statement that people are not allowed to march under Article 17? They're only allowed to assemble.
I think the first thing it does is that it undermines the essence of the system of governance that we subscribe to, democracy. I think that's the first thing, and it was absolutely wrong to do that. I like your choice of word when you say he insinuated. That was an insinuation because it's wrong. And the Constitution provides that it is the right of the people to assemble when they so desire. How do people assemble? Especially when people are aggrieved. That is why your responsibility in a democracy is to ensure the well-being of the people so that you address the issue, you even prevent those issues of protest. It must not be, a character of the nation. That's what good governance does. It ensures that the people remain peaceful, that the people remain stable. When the economic security of the people is not guaranteed, that's when the subject of protest, the subject of demonstration, become apparent. And that's the situation with Liberia. So the RG should be the least person to even make such statement. But it is not just about the RG. It is about the understanding of the government that the intent of the protest is to take down the government. Okay, so the question is, why then the protest wasn't prevented? Because the president and the government in general had so many opportunities to avert this situation. Mm-hmm. The president needed to come up and speak to the Liberian people from his heart about concrete action, realistic action, implementable action to address this situation. Why the protest? That's a critical question. Why the protest? When the president,
and before we come to the specific of this particular protest, we're talking about Article 17. Peaceful assembly. Not, the Constitution, what they are arguing is, they say assemble. How do you assemble? Does it mean you walk from Broad Street to Logan Town? Is that assembly? And who's supposed to ensure, because it's a orderly and peaceable, who's supposed to ensure that the protest is peaceful and is orderly? Is it a protester? Is it a government? Or who? Who does that?
The questions are so simple. The government of the day has the constitutional responsibility to guarantee the security and safety of the people. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure that the people assemble peacefully if they so desire. The government must not be asking questions about security matters. If the people say they want to assemble in keeping with the Constitution, the government must not deny that. The government must ensure that the people assemble in keeping with their hopes and aspirations. The government must provide security. There's no ambiguity in that aspect of the Constitution.
But what's the responsibility of the protester when it comes to the orderliness and the peacefulness?
So it works hand in hand. Okay. When they organize their protests, the objective of the protest have been laid out to the Liberian people and to the rest of the world why they are protesting. It's no secret. They're not protesting about unknown issues. They are protesting about issues that are known and that have been laid out to the Liberian people. And they have said to the Liberian people how they will protest. They have committed to the government that they will be peaceful. They have committed to regional bodies that they will be peaceful. They have committed to the international community that they will be peaceful. That is their side of the bargain. The side of the bargain of the government must be that the government must come out with sincerity and commitment that it will ensure the guarantee of the safety of the protests. And how does the government carry out that? The government needs to work with the leadership of the protesters to ensure that they identify the places that were assembled and movements that were happening, how will it be done? They need to ensure that, but not to come out and make statements that will be anti-democratic. That is not acceptable under the arrangement that we have as a democratic system of governance. That is my position. That's what I know as far as ensuring the security and safety of the people. So the RG should have been the least person to have made such a pronouncement. And the impression that it gives the public is that the government doesn't still believe that the people should protest. They should assemble to present their position, their disapproval to the current economic situation in the country.
And Mr. Joekai, that's a good segue to the crush of the matter today. June 7th, Save the State protest. What's your stand? Do you support it?
I think just before you come and tell us what your stand is, Mr. Joekai, sorry for interrupting, Dennis. I think there's one thing, you were listing all of the commitments that the protesters made in terms of ensuring that this is going to be a peaceful protest. And one of the things that you touched on when I asked the question about the IG was that, the way the government is seeing this is that, these guys are coming in to kind of get rid of the government in a way. But the protesters have made it very clear, and I think that's one thing that you probably missed out, when you were giving the list. They've said on numerous occasions, we're not here to ask for the president to resign. We're not here to oust the president. We just want to present our grievances. So it's very clear from their point of view. This is not a coup d'etat, as some people on the government side might be taking it to be. This is not in any way an attempt to perpetrate violence. It's more just these people coming out to say, look, this is what we think is happening right now. These are the things we have issues with. Can you try and resolve these issues? But I think to Dennis' point, I'll just hand you back to Dennis. I just wanted to bring that in so the listeners know that the protesters have been very clear that they are not after removing this president from office. All they want is to present their grievances so that he knows exactly what they're thinking.
Absolutely. And you were saying exactly what I just said, that the protesters have satisfied their side of the bargain. And they satisfied their side of the bargain by making clear to the Liberian people and the world that they are not protesting to take down the WIA government. No, they are not protesting to go and ask for the resignation of the president, but they are protesting to present to the government reasons why they disapprove the governance model right now, reasons why they disapprove, the policies of the government, reasons why they object to the current governance model. That's what they're doing. So it should be the government not to satisfy her side of the bargain, because the government has no option when it comes to the action of the citizen. They are doing this in keeping with Article 1 of the Constitution. And, and all power is inherent in that assembly. And George Weah too said that, he reaffirmed that in his first State of the Nation address when he read the principles of the Constitution, key provisions, when he took oath to defend, to protect, and uphold the Constitution and laws of the country. So I'm not sure that he's going to go back on that. I'm sure that he's going to make sure that that is guaranteed. And part of it is to ensure that the people have an unhindered protest. But how can he ensure that it is done successfully, which will also be good for him, for he and his government, is to ensure that they provide security for the people so that the people can protest the way they want to protest. In recent time, we have had something we call indicators. When Costa was going to Monrovia, I said in one of my conversations that the people did not necessarily go into the street to really welcome Costa. That was a test of what's supposed to happen on June 7th. That was part of demonstrating their disapproval of the current governance process, the current economic paralysis in the country. It was not necessarily all about going to welcome Costa. When they had a June 16 demonstration for Liberians to muster the courage to come up and take to the streets and go to diplomatic missions and present petitions to them, asking them to intervene in terms of making sure that there's independent investigation in the reported missing billions at the time. It was about demonstrating their disapproval of the current economic situation and the overall governance model. So the president should know that June 7 is not going to be the first, that this thing has started since he took over the leadership of the country. And if I were to be president, I would have done it differently. The first signal from the 16 billion would have taught me lesson that I needed to listen more, do less talking, develop robust policies that will address many of the issues that the people are dissatisfied about. That didn't happen until the second one happened. Costa went to Monrovia. Those are what we refer to as indicators that make you unpopular, not only as a leader, but as a government, and which pose serious credibility question to your legitimacy. Because when the people start to question your governance process, the people who hold the power, they are the power holders, start to question your leadership in terms of the way it conducts itself, then it should concern you to know that it's going to definitely border on your legitimacy as a government.
As I was asking, I can tell that you support the protest. Just tell me why.
Well, the reasons are simple for me.
Or you give your position
as an individual Liberian. From the outset of the WIA government, governance model. I realized that senior officials of the government started by being arrogant in terms of their reaction to the concerns of the Liberian people. When the people started to question, I'm coming with specifics, when the people started to question the private financing policy of the government, the private financing policy of the government, which led them into the Iboma and the Elton arrangement. The Liberian people did not get any concrete reaction from the government, but they were giving reactions that were totally in arrogance to the concerns of the Liberian people. You still have those two policies as legal instruments, even though they are not being implemented. It's totally unacceptable. When the government embarks on going into donors' account intended for economic transformation, because when you do governance and recovery through those funds, when you do livelihood projects, agriculture, education, healthcare, through those funds, you lift the economic standing of the people. If the government goes into those accounts and deplete those accounts intended for delivering the right programs to the people, the government shows not only insensitivity, but the government demonstrates that it lacks the will. It has the inability to lead, to govern.
Just hold your thought right there.
The government raises its own revenue and it is recklessly applied, misapplied. The president embarked on traveling spree, using taxpayers' money on trips that did not bring back any economic benefit to the people. You have no reason carrying more than 10, 15 persons to Senegal. You got no reason carrying the whole government, the leadership of the legislature, the leadership of the judiciary, the executive.
Hold your thought, Mr. Joekai. The phone lines are ranking up the hook.
Okay, well, we will continue to talk about the issues because the questions that people will ask will definitely arouse.
Right. Hello, your name and where you calling from?
My name is Ben and I'm calling from Minnesota. How are you?
What's your name again?
My name is Benjamin and I'm calling from Minnesota.
Benjamin, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comment?
Yeah. So what I want to say is that I listened to the brother Josiah as he was explaining with regards to the protest of the 60 billion and what is going on now. I think those are two separate issues. So the protest about that 60 billion, you could see the Liberians put themselves into that protest. Unless this June 7 protest has a lot of political intent. If you see Costa, if you see all of those other guys, these guys are into opposition. So even if they had the right intent, but the mere fact that these guys have been opposite to the government will still have a negative effect. I wish they would have used other people to have been into the front phase than using these two guys. These two guys, Costa and the other guy there in Liberia, that's the right people to actually be in the front phase of the entire protest. I do not agree with the protest, but I will support any protest that is intent.
Thank you, Benjamin.
All right.
Thank you. You can take your answer off the air.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, Joe, let's get this caller and then you can come in. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
My name is Lorenzo Gato. I'm calling from Fort Texas.
Lorenzo, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comment?
Let me take some notes.
Look like we lost the caller. Josiah, go ahead and respond to the first caller.
Ben agrees with the protest, but he doesn't agree with the organizers. He doesn't accept the organizers, in short. So the points I will put out regarding that are these. During the leadership of Madame Salif, who were the main organizers of protests in Liberia? They were political actors.
Let me answer the question. I can answer that question. It was the CDC. The CDC.
They were people who detested almost all of the policies of the Erling regime. They were people who demonstrated in all of the forms. Did they sit in action? They went on hunger strike. They did demonstration through the street. And some of them even carried caskets, embarrassingly, through the street. Those were political actors, but they believed those actions. Just yesterday, they believed those actions. This is hypocrisy. This is deception. So for me, I believe the protests are, I'm not looking at Costa. I'm not looking at Delon. The question we need to ask ourselves, the reasons for the protests, are they genuine? The answer is a resounding yes, they are. They are genuine. If Liberian people can come out in the numbers when a kid, and I call him a kid because in our tradition and setting, Martin Colley is my junior brother. If Martin Colley can lead the organization of a major rally that was successful, it means that it was not about Martin Colley. It was about the issues. If Henry Costa can talk about leaving the United States to go to Liberia and Liberians rise up and rally around him massively, it's not about Henry Costa. It's about the issues that matter to the Liberian people. So my brother Ben, what I can say to you is that I don't see the protest from a political dimension. I see the protest from a realistic perspective that there are serious economic issues in the country. I don't understand economics. I'm not an economist, but I do understand that there is hardship. And some of the factors that are responsible for that, there's no stability in the exchange rate. I know that it hasn't been before, but I know that it has been appreciable at certain levels. But the level at which we found it right now between the Liberian dollar and the US dollar, it is something unimaginable. And so that directly affects the prices of goods and services. That is an issue that the Liberian people need to call the attention of the government to. Absolutely. They need to do that. If you are having jobs issue, people are going to work and not getting paid on time, and they don't have the purchasing power to address those basic necessities of life, it is an issue that the people need to call the attention of their government to. If they are having image problem, the country is having image problem. And somebody will say, probably you want to alarm, but this is not about alarming. If you have a government going into donor accounts and taking monies, and government has to come to reaffirm that it's not going to borrow from itself, that is by taking money from the central bank and not applying it to the things for which they took it, then there are serious credibility questions imposed here. So the legitimacy of the government, she sees it. It's not us saying it. It's at stake. And that's why they are developing the feeling. And they are of the strongest opinion that the issue of June 7 is about taking the government down. But no, it's not about taking the government down. June 7 is about raising the antenna of the government. It's about being tolerant, to listen to the Liberian people, receive their concerns, and take robust economic measures to address them, implementable measures, not to rumble in a pre-recorded speech. Not to do that. Not to go about telling the Liberian people things that you are doing when no one has an idea where even the resources are coming from. There is no leadership that will make a decision such as the one made by George Weah personally. That's the first thing I'll think about. To just take over the leadership of a country and you refurbish all of your homes, transform all of your homes to meet presidential standards, and build additional luxury apartments to meet presidential standards. Nowhere in the world any leader will want to venture into such endeavor. It poses serious credibility questions to your leadership. It raises serious concern. The people in Liberia, they are no longer passive as they have been before in the past. So these are legitimate concerns that the Liberian people want to present to the government. And I don't think people should look at it from a political perspective. We should be genuine here and know that these concerns are legitimate. That is why I support it. That's the reason why I support it. And I said my eyes are not on Delon, my eyes are not on Costa, my eyes are on the Liberian people who have developed the urge to come up to demonstrate. Even by their action alone in the street is enough. Who told you that the government is not aware of the economic crisis in the country? They are aware. So even if the people come out in the street and nobody says anything to the president, their action speaks louder than words. Louder than words. Just to come out and stand up in the street without breaking anything, without running anywhere, just to stand up in the street for a day is enough to speak truth to power. Their silence is enough. It's an awakening that must be able to demonstrate to the government that the people don't accept anymore the current governance model. They don't. And when I would define that for the people before they claim that I'm calling for the removal, and I say model the system.
Let me jump in quite quickly here, because obviously I disagree with the point that our brother made as well, because when he said people like Costa and people like Delon, people like Costa and people like Delon are Liberians. They have a right to organize a protest. So, I personally do disagree with the way he actually frame his statement. But there is something else that I've been wondering about, and I would like for you to shed a little bit of light on. There was a meeting organized on the 14th of May, where all of the protesters, not all of them, but the leadership of the protest were invited to a meeting with the president and with the government, with international partners as mediators. Now, I believe that was an opportunity for them to present to the government grievances and say, look, here are our list of grievances. Can you sort these things out before the 7th of June? And if you do start to show signs that you want to sort these out, then we can suspend or delay or cancel the protest in its entirety. What's your opinion on that suggestion?
And you can take it the other way around, that it was an opportunity also for the president to speak from his heart. Use that gathering to speak to the Liberian people. You are organizing a protest because you are not happy about the economy. I accept. The figures right now, the numbers right now, the data right now, as far as the economy is concerned, right now, they are not good. I accept it. The exchange rate will need some level of stability so that we can reduce the prices of commodities in the market. The education sector is not good. I accept that. The health sector is not good. I accept that. I want to beg you people and beg the Liberian people, forgo June 7. Hold me accountable for the next 10 months. Policies that I am going to introduce, if they fail to address the current economic situation, security situation in the country, then you can do anything you want to do. You can protest, you can do anything. Liberian people are reasonable people. Liberian people are reasonable people. And I've said that the people are encouraged. The people are emboldened to protest because of the demonstrated arrogance of the government. They've shown insensitivity to the concerns of the Liberian people. It is done by senior ministers. You know what it means for a minister who is responsible for fiscal management in the country to just put his finger to his mouth and the picture goes viral? You know the explanations of that. That picture will live on forever in your life. And at a particular moment where there is serious economic issue, the economy is in a crashing mode, and you put your finger to your mouth and show to the Liberian people, that's absolute arrogance. You know what it means? You know what it means? You know what it means for the Minister of Information, who's supposed to be communicating government policies, who's supposed to be bringing the government and the people together, because that's a democracy. Who's supposed to be making sure that the people understand the workings of the government, puts his finger to his lips and show to the Liberian people? It means a lot. It means a whole word. It's wrong. You know what it means for the Minister of State for Presidential Affairs to be standing with those people and smiling while such action is going on? He acquiesced their actions. This is wrong. These are people who's supposed to be ensuring that the policies of the government are implemented in a way to meet the hopes and aspirations of the Liberian people. Making education affordable, making healthcare affordable, you know, making sure that Liberians have the purchasing power. Those who have jobs, they should be paid. Those who don't have jobs and are qualified, jobs should be created for them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it was all rosy when George Weah took over. No. I'm one person who commended Madame Salif for the transformation that took place because she inherited a dysfunctional state, a dysfunctional country. Let me have the opportunity to speak about that. The Liberia that Madame Salif inherited was dysfunctional. There were no systems and structures. It was because of the leadership strategy that attracted the international community and the assisted Liberia that we moved from that state, that dysfunctional state, to the state of acceptability and found ourselves back in the community of nations in a way that we started getting investments to create jobs for Liberians, that we started talking about improving our educational system, that we started talking about transforming our health sector, that we started talking about improving the economy. Those were things that were done. But let me tell you where she messed up. I'm one of those on record, and it's in many of my written materials, that Madame Salif established all of the integrated institutions. That was a very good initiative to make sure that they address this common enemy, our scourge, corruption. But Madame Salif lacked the willpower to allow those independent institutions to perform in keeping with the statutes establishing them to deal with the issue of corruption. That led to destroying the legacy that she was supposed to establish. It undermined her government because many of our senior officials, it was a bonanza.
Okay,
people were engaged in corrupt activities and went scot-free. I know. Joekai? But as far as transforming our country from a dysfunctional state to an appreciable state, where George Weah inherited and had a responsibility to consolidate and move forward, I think they did well in that respect. So those institutions now are supposed to be used by George Weah to make sure that there is an in-house cleaning.
All right, thank you, Joekai. And sorry, we had some technical difficulties at my end.
I hope everything I said was on. I hope
everything was on.
No, everything it was on, and we have callers on the line who want to come in. But my co-host, my guest co-host, has another appointment which he had to leave now. So, Mr. Booty, if you have your final words, 20 seconds.
Well, I think the only thing for me is to say to Mr. Joekai, and I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate your comments and honesty. I believe that a lot of Liberians have learned a lot today, myself included. And hopefully when you continue the show, you will give more insight and understanding to the Liberian people, to show to people that, look, it is within our rights to do what these courageous Liberians are standing up to do. And we should all support them in a peaceful and to ensure in peaceful manner to ensure that there is security. And I hope to interact with you again in the future. And I just want to say, to enjoy the rest of the show and thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fidel.
I'm not sure we are here for long because
our clock is winding down. We have a caller on the line. Caller, your name and where you're coming from. And Fidel, was great having you.
Thank you.
I don't know what it's mean, but Joekai is, I was saying, Fadiga, we're just doing it for my friend and brother, Joekai, Josiah, just started to lend my voice to this conversation.
Mr. Fadiga, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you so much. I didn't see the topic, but just based on what Joekai has been explaining, should be centered around the plane protest.
Yes.
And it saddens me that the same instrument that other people used in the past, now that they are in government, protest is a bad thing, they will bring war. And like we were first on the war with no guys, but at least we have had time for the war to kind of fade away from our minds and something, but they exploited our young children, turning them into political zombies, and it just put them in the street at will. Some of the issues that they were demonstrating for had no merit. Some of the things that they were criticizing earlier for what happened. They didn't understand the issue, and the protest did not yield any result. It just ended up being a bunch of noise because what happened here is why Ellen won Ellen got. And the reason Ellen got is because we didn't have enough men with spines that actually were doing this for the people. They were always doing it to score political points, or either to have seat on the table or to cash in. So the CDC really didn't benefit anything from the protest. What we are seeing now is people that have seat on the table before, people that understand the regime of governing, people that understand all the different loopholes in government, now scrutinizing this government.
Right.
It's going to be very difficult because you have a more knowledgeable opposition, you have a more knowledgeable people on the other side. So it is difficult. It's not that some of the things are unique to this government. It's just that we have more knowledgeable people criticizing this government. And the government is our own worst enemy. I think we have a very weak opposition. The opposition has tried gaining their leg here, so the lone wolves are stealing the show. We see other people because our people are, let's not forget, our people are starving for leadership. Right. They have tried so many different kinds of people, and they have all left.
All right. Okay, Azan, there are a lot of calls coming. If you can wrap up.
Let me wrap up. So as far as this whole protest is concerned, protests never hurt a country. Protests do not bring war. People that want to bring war, they negotiate for arms, they go in the butchers, and they bring people. People that make noise with violence, the only thing they can do. And if store get broken, that's why we have police. That's why we have police for those that want to vandalize.
Precisely.
People protest, some people loot. Even in America, that people want to have everything. So there will be 100% violent free. Whenever you put more than 1,000 people in the street, you should expect something to happen. So if that's the ground that people use it on, because just say nobody should protest, because there will be nobody can guarantee that.
Right.
All right. There is a reason for this protest, and people should focus on that reason. Georgia is corrupt, he is finishing our resources, and his bad governance is causing our people to suffer because you know what? People do not trust this government, and when they do not trust this government, our international partners do not trust this government, they will hold funding, businesses, direct foreign investment will not come in the country. So, I mean, I wish I had more time to explain.
I know. Thank you, Azam. Thank you so much for calling. You can take your answer off the head. All right. And you heard Hassan's comment. My question to you now is, there's a litany of issues that are being brought to the table. How does this protest fix this issue?
Firstly, the Constitution guarantees that the people should not be silent about issues that affect them. So they are using that appropriately through this protest. And what should that do to the government is to call the government to action. That's what it should do. And that's our hope. If the government is genuine, if the government is going to have second thought about making sure that it addresses these issues then there will be transformation. Then the issue of protests will now become history during this George Weah chapter. But going forward, if the people protest in terms of presenting their position statement or their petition to the government, as they call it, and absolutely it falls on deaf ears,
right,
you can be sure that there will even be larger protests.
Let me hold you to that. Let me hold you to that. If the intent is to present your position to government, the protest leader had that perfect opportunity when they met with the president and the ECOWAS leader. Wouldn't that be a way to present whatever you're saying instead of taking people in the street?
The protest was not organized to meet the president at the foreign ministry to present their position. The protest was organized for the Liberian people themselves to do a showcase reflective of their disapproval of the policies of the government. The leadership of the protest COP was not mandated to go and present the petition to the president, but to go and ask the president for security of the protests. Plans for the protests are already in place.
No.
The government only needs to provide that security in keeping with their mandate that's been given them by the Liberian people to provide security for such protests. So it doesn't matter where they present it. If the Liberian people demonstrate that by presenting the protest, their petition at the protest, good for the president and the entire government. The most important thing is to act. But let me tell you another thing that the president should have done. That was a greater opportunity, I said it earlier, a greater opportunity for the president to also encourage Liberians to abandon the protests when they had a meeting.
No, I get that. All I was saying was, if your desire is to present a petition to the president, and the president say, "Give me your petition," and you say, "No, I'm waiting for June 7th," it makes one to wonder whether your intended purpose is to present these grievances or to showcase your political will to put people in the street and showcase that you have the power of the people behind you.
No.
And we have a caller on the line after your comment.
I understand it differently, Dennis. And the way I understand it is that they were only demonstrating leadership. That was not what they were asked to do by the people, to go and present a petition in a room to the president. Prior to that meeting, the protest was playing prior to that meeting. And all of the activities characterizing the protests are outlined, that they were assembled and that they will present their petition to the government in the public. They did not say that they will organize the protest and on the eve of the protest, they will go and present their petition to the president. If the president called an impromptu meeting, I called that an impromptu meeting, and he was under pressure to call that. Right. So the protesters did not have to succumb to that pressure at that time.
Okay, we have a caller on the line. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
Calling from Minnesota.
Your name again? Macaulay, your question or comment?
Yes, I just want to say hi to all of you, Mr. Joekai, and the host, Mr. John, all of you. Quickly, I listened to Mr. Joekai, and he used the word on several occasions, hypocrisy, and but for me, this is exactly what I see coming out of Mr. Joekai and most of those in the protest. All of us know that protest, petition, or whatever you want to call it, is protected on our Constitution, and we all are respecters of the rule of law. So I don't have problem with people wanting to protest or whatsoever. I think the reason why people are kind of jittery about those wanting to protest is because our society is not, we have a lot of limitations in terms of our security apparatuses. We don't have those logistics and manpower and capacity capacity is still kind of low in our society, unfortunately. A system that Mr. Joekai was part of for the last 12 years left us with a country with declining GDP, inflation increasing, a lot of unfortunate economic situation that was left back by the previous government.
Okay.
And the reality is things are not good in Liberia economically, but we see those that are trying to exploit the current situation for their own self-political reasons.
Okay.
Listen, why you think that
just wrap up. Just wrap up your comments.
Yeah, quickly. Why do you think they selected Mr. DeLong to be the spokesperson? Because what? They have a political reason why they are organizing the protest, and they know that there's a by-election coming out, and they want him. And he's the candidate for the upcoming senatorial by-election from the opposition front. So they just using this current economic situation that was left by Mr. Joekai and the rest of those for the previous government to exploit our people for political reasons. But
thank you.
Quickly, I hope that our people will go through this protest and everything will be fine, and we will continue to strive as we see this government is doing to make things better. Thank you.
Thank you, Macaulay. Mr. Joekai.
Yeah, I think those were just an embodiment of contradictions. I think Macaulay made himself, I mean, that was embarrassing. He said he supported the protest, and the protest is guaranteed by our constitution, and the people should go ahead and protest. So he is hoping that the outcome of the protest will be good. Meanwhile, he referred to me making comments that are hypocritical, even though he was not specific about any of those comments. So he said something specifically that I have been saying that being hypocritical, that would be a different thing. I would have responded in a way. When he generalized the failure of the past government, then it becomes difficult to address it, because if he speaks to specifics, that will be a different thing. Talking about the economic decline, I've said, I'm on record on other shows and this show, that we did not inherit a rosy economy, a rosy situation. I said that. Equally so, we had a responsibility to consolidate what he inherited, because efforts were being made, gains were being made. And comparatively, if you want to look at the Liberia he inherited and the Liberia that Ellie inherited, those are two different scenarios that in any way you cannot compare, because one was dysfunctional and one was at an appreciable level that only needed a leadership to enhance it, a leadership to strengthen it in every sphere. That's all. Okay. So I don't think I have much to say to Mr. Macaulay. The others who are listening, they better understand what he said.
The other charge against you, and I saw some comments here, which because of time I can't go into, but what others are saying that you are on record of being on the other side during the elections, and making some comments that in fact George Weah was not your president. Mm-hmm. So they say it makes them to think that your action to support the protest is a continuation of the 2017 election. What do you say to that?
Well, I have always said prior to the 2017 election that we did not have any credible leadership experience to be entrusted with the leadership of the country. I've said that years back. I projected that. I said that during the elections. And here is it. Let me make myself clear here. During the election, I ran as an independent candidate in District Number 3. I supported all aspects of my own election, all aspects of my own election, okay? And after the election, we were left with two candidates in the race, Dennis. We were left with an experienced agriculturalist, administrator, and a diplomat. And we were left with a soccer player, an established soccer player, and a career entertainer, and one who motivate young people. Those were the two characters. One who could motivate young people to improve their social life. And I always say that about Josh Weah, that he lured young people into the soccer arena, into the soccer field. But when it comes to political leadership, governance in the country, the best option was the diplomat, was the agriculturalist, was the administration. And that's the reason why I made my decision as an individual to support Joseph Joekai. I'm not a member of any political party. Records established that. And it was not wrong for me as a citizen of my country to support a candidate of my choice.
No, you are correct. Let's hear from the caller on the line.
That's it. And the elections have come and gone.
Right.
Yeah.
But the charge is the election finished, but bulk of the people that support the protest are people that were either on the Joseph Joekai camp or the LS Cummings camp. But hold your thought on that. Let's hear from the caller. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
My name is Reggie Thompson. I'm calling from Arizona. Phoenix.
Reggie, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comments? 1 minute, please.
No questions. Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you to you guys for such a platform for people to address situations back home.
Thank you.
That's very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, in the studio. I also want to say thank you to him. He's making some good points. When you put a full on argument, it shouldn't be personal. It should be on the issues, points, and I think he's doing that. The guy who called before me, he tried to make a point too, but I think some points were misleading in terms of the previous government. The government was not good, but like the guest said, they did inherit a broken country. And it was very difficult to get those things back in place. However, in the second term of the administration, things went bad. Apparently, they lost their thinking, so they were out of hand. So the administration did inherit a bad economy, but it was such that he could build upon it and move Liberia in a better direction. That was the reason why he was elected, and that's the reason why the party that was there before did not have the chance. So there was a strict mandate from the Liberian people that they wanted somebody with new, fresh ideas to move the country ahead.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not going that way. The country is heading in the wrong direction. The president does not want to understand that. The issue of corruption is at its peak. It's almost worse than where we were. And he needs to come to this understanding that Liberia has a serious problem. We have a crisis. We consider it a crisis. Liberia needs a crisis solution.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, I said thank you, sir. We are running out of time, so I just want you to conclude, please.
What I would suggest, what I would say to him, if he's listening, I guess he is, so anybody close to him, you would have to listen to the protesters. It's not whether they did not present the application to him or for them or not. It's the fact that they have the right to protest.
Right.
To get the country going the way they think it should go. So you need to listen to them. And if personally, I would suggest to him, look, you will have to do a complete cabinet reshuffle. Put people that know, that have quite understand experience on the job.
Okay.
And get your boys at the back seat. I know partisan issue is here too, but let them go at the back seat and learn over the years. Because it's not party, it's about country.
You're right.
Yeah, get the right people on the job. We know very well he himself is not level-headed. The people around him that's going to help. It makes no sense when you're not up to the task and you still get people around you that are doing worse things.
All right.
You need to get people around him. And if he can't do that, it's going to be disastrous. He will have to blame himself by the Liberian people trying to force him out of there.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. So Joekai, your response. And we have one more caller, and then we can wind this down.
Well, I don't think there's anything to respond to. I think he was on track. He just summarized the basic things we've been discussing here, talking about, we are inheriting a country that he had an opportunity to improve because he had a lot of things in place in terms of institutional frameworks. He already had donors, line up assistance from foreign missions were not dwindling seriously. So he had an opportunity to strengthen the confidence and help him to generate the kind of revenue and the kind of support, financial and technical, to help improve the different sectors. But I mean, the policies have just ran contrary to that.
We have a caller on the line. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
I'm Darius calling from Columbus, Ohio.
Darius, your question or comments, 30 seconds, please.
Yes, I will just make a comment. Liberia is all we have, and the June 7th protest, because I was just in Liberia. The things that go wrong in Liberia, I just go back 2 weeks ago. Things is very high in Liberia. Protest is not a bad thing. I was there when Emmanuel Chavez and they rallied for war and economic crime code. It was peaceful.
Right.
Nothing happened in Liberia. Liberia is a very difficult place right now for young people. The environment in Liberia now is not the way it used to be 10 years ago. So for the people to gather the protest is not a bad thing. Liberians are in the U.S. that consider it to be bad, and Phoenician men are getting together and making this thing look like it's so bad. We all need to understand we have to do a rebrand. Liberia needs change. The only way we can do this, we have to hold the government to the seat.
Exactly.
There are a lot of things happening in Liberia. I was there because I'm trying to establish a library. I saw young people, I interact with them. They were there for the project. We started to build a library there. I'm a young librarian. I'm 23 years old. I'm trying to build a library in Liberia. I understand how people live in Liberia. It's not something that we have to keep quiet because of political affiliation. We have to put Liberia first. We need to understand this is Liberia, the only country we can boast of. It shouldn't be for party. That's all. If we listen, people that love George, we are asking within our mind, they don't love me. Because if you love somebody, you will tell them the truth when they are doing wrong.
Thank you.
Another thing, lastly, before I leave, where the president said that he's going to follow people for 10 years, I can tell you he was only doing it to blindfold the protester, to calm people down, but that was not in place at this time. He should have done that a long time ago, not right now. He just tried to deceive the people. He told Liberian people he was not going to have discussion with protesters. Like your girls are saying, I listened to everyone when the president was interviewing when you were doing your talk. He said he was not going to meet with them, but he meet with them because the pressure was on him, and that's why he's doing now. We need to build Liberia. Let us go together and contribute towards the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Joekai, do you also see that those who think the leadership of the protest pose some concern?
Dennis, I will say this, and probably it will be a very good way for me to close. It's not about me, Joekai, as an individual, or who you see me to be. It's not about Dylan. It's not about Costa. It's not about Martin Colley. It's not about some of the senators and representatives involved. It's not about other Liberians in the diaspora who are talking about it, or their political alignments, or their tribal affiliations. It is about a major question that confronts us. Is our country okay? Then if somebody were to ask you that question, your answer will be a resounding no. Our country is not okay.
I think there's an agreement that the country is not okay, but how to fix it, that's how
there is a serious problem in the country. And the problem stems from the way it is being governed. The economy is bad. The image of the country is bad. And while the image is bad, our government is not only stealing from herself, misapplying its own resources. Our government is misapplying donor funding. It's not typical in our history, in our existence. It's wrong. Our government is not developing and applying policies that resonate with the realities of the day. It's wrong. There is poverty, extreme hardship, extreme corruption. It's not stopping. It's pervasive. Sleep has gone to the level it hasn't been. So there is a problem. So it's not about the people who calling for us to address these issues. So it's about the way we can address the issue. And that is what I want the government to address herself to. And that's why the protest is necessary. If the government would not do it on its own, when they said that it will have infused 25 million in the economy to bring stability in the exchange rate between the Liberian dollar and the US dollar, if the government could not do that, and the money was misapplied, the money was given to a long list of businesses, ghost institutions, they don't.
Let me hold you right there and bring in. Let me hold you right there and bring in Mr. Toto.
And they can account for it. If the government will talk about investigation that was done by her own handpicked committee, and the government will be investigated by international bodies, and they will come up with reports that point to gross inefficiency across government, that will point out to serious economic issues projected in the future. Even the IMF projected that the growth rate is going to be at 0.4%. It should be an issue.
Good. So let me hold you right there and bring. Let me hold you right there and bring in Mr. Judge Toto. He's been calling, and we have, I think, like 5 minutes to go. Mr. Toto, quickly.
Okay, we have 5 minutes. That's okay. Hey, Josh, Mr. Bush, yeah.
Mr. Joekai raised a very important point. He said most of the directors of Liberia are here today. But one thing I want to say is that for some of us that draw the voice or the voices of the international community to say that this was the issue here and dialogue. And for some of us to say the security implication in Liberia. For the past 4 years, Madam Ellen Johnson said he was president. She did not really want to build our security apparatus in Liberia. We are lacking the security. And we are looking at the security of this project. And that's not going to Liberia when they go back to war.
Yeah.
But in case the project go on with the disruption or enter or break out through the protest, we will see how we use that. We have people that are still barring the street of Liberia. We have former combatants who we have to retain their property. People will use that to do property and destroy people property in Liberia. That's what they consider that we are looking at. Even
Mr. Toto, before Joekai comes in, so are you saying, so how long can we wait for that perfect situation before we have a protest?
Oh, that's why the issue of dialogue is very important. Where the protesters, the use of the issue of dialogue is used the government. If the government cannot say the listen to the court system, they have the right, they can take the government to court. Also, for the issue that they raise in their petition, that's some of the issues that they raise. I saw in the petition that about the property, was also on the issue. Those are issues that we think about the court. We have system of government in Liberia. We got the stupid zero tools. Instead of all coming to jump in the street elsewhere and looking at the brutality of Liberia. Those are some of the things that people try to look at. And that's something that we're trying to stop the protest for protest. We have the constitution right. We're looking at the bigger picture of it. The case of the disruption. That's the point I'm trying to raise.
Thank you, Mr. Toto. Thank you. Mr. Joekai, I think all the callers, they are in agreement that there are issues, but is the way to go about solving the issue, that's where they differ. Mr. Toto is saying the situation is fragile. What's your comment?
Dennis, I found it incomprehensible. That first, let me acknowledge the comments of Mr. Toto. Mr. Toto is somebody very close to me. He happens to be a church brother of mine. We are all Lutherans. He's also the board chair of EULA that covers every one of us here in the United States. But let me say this. I find it incomprehensible when people are concerned about the security of the planned protest. And this is my reason. Just yesterday, we were fighting the health emergency, Ebola, when Molba Molu, Akaras Gray, and their allies were marching, calling for the alien regime to come down in the midst of fighting Ebola in Liberia. No one has security concerns. Just yesterday, CDC assembled at the United States Embassy and sat there in a hunger strike for days. Just yesterday, CDC took to the streets of Monrovia at will, never announced. Sometimes we just see them, different street corners. There were no security concerns.
Right.
Just yesterday, CDC were carrying caskets across Monrovia, demonstrating the death of a sitting president and a sitting vice president. Just yesterday.
Let me answer that.
Yesterday, Molba Molu, Akaros Gray, even our own friend, Bwaka Jaliba, they were main campaigners of the War and Economic Crimes Court. Just yesterday.
But here's the thing. When you say yesterday, you are not speaking that literally.
So the point I am making here is that
before you make that point,
Dennis. Hello?
Before you make that point, so you can conclude in it.
Yeah.
What they are saying is when they were doing it, the people that were opposing that idea, the Mo Ali and the rest of the people, they are the one now saying the idea is good. So it goes both ways.
No. Nobody is on record to point out points where people said that they should not protest. Nobody is on record for that. Nobody. And some of those protest actions came out with positions that the then government also considered and made a part of its development agenda. Improving security, improving healthcare, improving education. Those were concerns raised by them. They were considered. And that is healthy in a democratic form of government. The system provides for that. So I am simply saying that was acceptable yesterday. But today, we are having a crashing economy. Now there are security concerns that people should not come up to talk about that. We are having corruption, which is standing on the head of everyone in our country, that has made situation worse than the recent past. No one should come to talk about that. We are having a deplorable education and healthcare systems. Nobody should come out to talk about that. Families are finding it difficult to keep their own homes, their shelters. People no longer have the purchasing powers that they had because jobs that they have, they are actually losing them or they've lost them already. And those who are qualified don't have it. They don't have incomes. Nobody should come up to talk about that. The security concern, you know why the protest? It's because of the very security concern. There are security concerns that the Liberian people are having and they want to talk about that. When officials of government can die, mysterious death, and no concern. When rape has increased, it's happening almost every day. Nobody is accountable to that. When people are dying in mysterious ways, nobody is talking about that. When the security of the individual citizen is no longer guaranteed, nobody talking about that. When you cannot go to places at certain time, nobody, that's part of the concern why the Liberian people want to come up and petition their own government. So the question that I have to ask, is it wrong to do that? Is the government not having the responsibility under this arrangement of government, this model of government, to guarantee that? People should start being hypocritical. That's the point I want to make. With hypocrisy, we cannot live in it forever. And this has kept us down as a people and a nation for so long. We have hailed individuals as our leaders and not looking at the policies that they have responsibility to implement for our common good. That's the missing link. So it has been about who is talking about the issue. It has not been about what is the issue the person is talking about. What is the genuine nature of the issue the person is talking about? In other countries, you have opposition proposing issues for change, and it is welcome. That's why you have opposition, and that's why you have governing parties, so that the opposition is able to keep the government in the way that it performs by delivering on its mandate. So why is it about the people and why is it not about the issues? Nobody is making up anything here. I want to use this opportunity to call on the Liberian people that they have to move away from this whole issue of still keeping George Weah in the state of a celebrity that should be untouchable, no matter what he does. That's a mindset that we need to get rid of. George Weah should be allowed to perform. And he is being deceived by people around him because he doesn't have that sophistication of reasoning. And every Liberian knows that. And that's why I have said over and over, and people have problems with me. I projected before he became president that he
hold
had the credible leadership ability to govern, because to govern is not in isolation. You must be having some qualities to keep people together. That's what leadership is about. Leadership is to lead. And to lead, you must have the qualities to lead. It's not there. And that's why Liberia is having the issues Liberia is having right now. So the issue of protest is paramount. And probably Josh, we are listening when the Liberian people rise.
Okay. Wait,
probably they will touch him.
Joekai,
in a way.
Just hold on, because we are winding down. Caller, you have 30 seconds because we are about to close.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your show. This is Julius.
Julius, your question or comment?
Yeah, I want to make my input.
Okay.
I think Joekai is not fair to the discussion. Joekai was saying many of the time for how Joseph Joekai campaigning immensely to make sure that Joseph Joekai was elected. This Joekai saw all of the ills in society at the time. He even pointed out to the point where he said, everyone that was talking about at the time they wanted to protest and all that kind of stuff. But at the time, the security issue in our country, we have all men in the country. I can recall when CDC staged a protest right before they started office. Who were the first security force that moved in to stop the CDC from even passing in from the president's house was the all-male forces. Those guys moved in and put them right before the president's house and begin to even make a protest of a prayer to even move forward. So if Joekai is telling me today, why yesterday, those are all charades. We have to fit in the fight. The fight is our country at this point in time, our country have a security issue. On the serious note, people who thought they said, oh, they don't want to put a protest. Not that they don't want people to protest, but because they are looking at the security issue in our country and allow those what it is. We just came from 14 years of crisis in our country. Most of even the youth in our country, they are all violent.
Thank you.
People go on social media and stuff, they just talk to anybody any kind of way.
I know.
They don't even have remorse. You look for what outside it is, I can say it's more problematic. Let me not lie to you. Joekai is not facing the reality. He's doing it because he lost the election. He felt that when he was won election, they were getting some other lucrative position in government, but because those things don't exist, so this guy came in a vindictive manner to pay back to people and try to think that they're going to use other people who don't understand the issue. So let me tell you one thing.
No, before you continue, let me bring. We have had protests under George Weah presidency. Two major ones I recall. They were peaceful. What's different about this protest, and why you think?
The difference about this protest is that even the Kenyan protest of this protest, the left of this protest I'm saying, they have raised lot of skepticism around the people. People are discussing it on a daily basis.
Right.
This protest is different from any other protest on the basis because the failure. Even those people are playing the protest. So those are people who went in the past government for the last 12 years. Those are people. Are you telling me so not only was not taken away from the government?
Yeah, but do you recognize the issues they are raising are legitimate? Forget about the people.
We need to put on this laws in the first place because he just said there was no money available for this government. Even during the last government, no money was taken away. Go to the foreign ministry, talk about 60 million. Talk about the money that keep on the country.
Thank you.
So people need to be factual to the point.
Thank you, Julius. I agree. Thank you so much. Let's please take your answer from Joekai off the line, okay?
So Dennis, again, and we keep getting the contradictions, serious contradictions. He talked about protests during Madam Salif's time. The security of our country was in the hands of the international peacekeeping force.
Mm-hmm. Liberia
has graduated from that state to taking over her own security, a process that I play a major role in transitioning Liberia from the security of the nation in the hands of the international community to the Liberian government. Why are Liberians craving to protest? We have to go to those issues. The brother has not said anything. He tried to talk about me, that Joekai was there, the past regime and XYZ. let's be clear here. I ran and I was behind Joseph Boakai campaigning. How many times have I not said this? Who did not campaign? Who did not take side in the election? The elections are over. He talked about job. No, I don't have to be in government before I get a job. And let me make this for the record. I currently work for a renowned global communication management company. Then when I left from Liberia a few months, I work for Document Management Technologies Solutions, Global Corporation, Blue Crest. You only need to Google it and know where it is. Yes. And this is not about going to look for a job. And some of us, when we say we are global citizens, it's because we are situated either by our education and our experience to be able to make impact wherever we find ourselves in the world. So let's take that out, the issue of job. Let's put that one side. Kekula is absolutely wrong about that. Nobody was seeking job at the expense of the people. What we sought when we ran in district number 3 was to help to make our community better, was to help our people understanding about who they're supposed to be as citizens. Let's come to protests. I spoke about protests yesterday, and I maintain it. We had a different protest actions yesterday. They were not concerned about security situation when we had the international community providing security. Today, we had 2 different protests that you just mentioned to him that was successful under the WEA leadership. Why are they trying to prevent this protest? Because they gave me a wrong impression to the Liberian people, and that's the canopy they are using, that their protest is intended to take the government down. No. I have said that the protesters have committed themselves, and Liberians have demonstrated that. When Liberians came out in the street just yesterday in the name of going to welcome Costa, and as I said, my own dimension is that they were going out as a test of what they want to do on June 7th, not necessarily to welcome Costa, but to demonstrate that they have a disapproval of what is happening in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Joekai.
That was peaceful. And the fact that they were not provoked, it went peacefully. And if Liberians are not provoked by the government that has the constitutional responsibility to provide security, the protests of June 7 will be peaceful. Nobody should use politics here to prevent this situation. Liberians have lost faith in the justice system. What are you talking about? They lost faith in the way the government is proceeding. Why are you talking about using court system and not to protest? Is that not their right? The Liberians supposed to make a choice. What are
that's their right. We have 2 minutes left. I want to use those 2 minutes. At what point will you not continue to support the protest? And I'm saying this because let's say the protests go on for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or what is the red line for you in the execution of this June 7 protest?
Oh, well, when the leaders of the protest run contrary to the established objective of the protest, and that is to petition the government. And if they should go to the street and want to be there for 10 days, 15 days, as long as they are peaceful, and equally so, that they are not provoked. Dennis, don't forget about that. You are asking about my red line, also ask about the government. When the government does not provoke the people in contravention of its responsibility to provide security, when the people go in the street by themselves and start doing things that run contrary to the reason for which they took to the streets to petition their government, then I call it a quit at that point.
What if they paralyze the city so that the ordinary Bonyano cannot go to the market because there's no transportation, everything is paralyzed? Is that a red line for you? Or you continue to go on indefinitely?
But the question I will ask then is, why will the government not respond to the needs of the people when it is its responsibility? It has to wait until Boyna cannot go to the market. That's the critical question. That's the critical question. Do you know that?
That's a fair one.
Do you know that? Do you know that the government must be able to respond effectively and appropriately to the cause of the people? Do you know that the government did not establish itself, established by the people?
That is correct. So that means the protesters, the government should open the roads so that car can still move through even though people are protesting.
So the way I will finally respond to this question is that the government should be able to provide the necessary security for the protesters to engage with it, because it is their government and it is their right to summon the government, to petition the government at any time they want to do that. So the government must not create a situation whereby the process of petitioning her or summoning her will affect Boina going to the market. That's the first thing we should be addressing. Not that the protesters should stop Boina from going to the market. No, but it should be about the government creating the corridor. And that's part of good governance. Right. After all, the government must ensure that.
Sure. Let me get your final comments. I think we've been a pleasure having you. We want to thank all our viewers across the globe. Unfortunately, we're not able to really go to Facebook because the topic is so lively and people are on the phone. But just give us your final comments. 1 minute.
Well, again, let me use the opportunity to thank you, Dennis. This is really good for me. As I said from the outset, that not many Liberians will have such opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to access your platform. That's made me to be heard across the world, the globe. I appreciate it so much. Let me say to Liberians that let us not keep looking at individuals. We are the only group of people probably that, and I need to read other studies, that other study reports rather, that are people who don't appreciate their own, in terms of people who have some expertise or some qualities that they can share. Because the moment Dennis is ready to talk about media issues, we are ready to ask, who are the people Dennis associate with? And the moment they start to name some people who they don't like, then Dennis does not have expertise in the media area. This is wrong orientation. This is wrong mindset. Every one of us, irrespective of our creed, irrespective of our alignments, what are social, political, or economic alignments, each of us have some qualities that are very, very germane for Liberia. And the only time we can start to realize that is to look beyond the name Josiah and who Josiah aligns with, is to see the qualities that Josiah brings to the table, the issues that matter to us as common interests. And that's what I like to caution Liberians about. For too long, we've looked out there to foreigners coming to deal with our own issues. It's shameful and embarrassing. And I was just saying to some people, to a group recently, that why is it that the international community has to always come to us when we cause problem, help us put our house back into order, and then when they leave, we fail to manage ourselves?
I know, that's a big problem.
It's shame and embarrassing, and that got to stop. We got to demonstrate leadership. There are good Liberians. There are Liberians with good leadership qualities. We have to help our fellow Liberians, our brothers and sisters, to make the right choices when we are instituting leadership in our country. That's what we have to do. So take your eyes off Dennis as who Dennis is, but what Dennis is capable of doing. Let's explore that.
Before you conclude your final thoughts, I want to apologize. I got my very last caller on the line. Caller, you have just 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, my name is President Sharif, and I call you from Maryland. And I want to say hi to my instructor, my foundation builder. He taught me when I was in high school in J.J. Ross. And I want to say hi to you. I would say Prof. That's what we can call it. I say hi to my instructor.
Mm-hmm.
After listening to Mr. Joekai explain what is unfolding in Liberia, and I think I respect his view. But it is unfortunate that my instructor, my foundation builder, is not being fair to every one of us, especially to some of us who are very open-minded and don't look at the problem of Liberia from a political standpoint. My own instructor was one of those who benefited from the Unity Party government that he was a member of and was given a lucrative position in the NEC, National Election Commission. We know that some of these protests are, based on anger from the very beginning. We follow closely the argument of my own instructor, Mr. Joekai, from Liberia. These are people who never, and even in the network, will never agree that President President Weah is the president of the Republic of Liberia and won a democratic election. So they will do everything, even though we understand how fragile our beings are, how limited our capacity are as Liberians to be able to manage ourselves or even manage a peaceful demonstration.
But Prince,
But these people,
Prince, does that invalidate the issues they are raising? Speak to the issues.
all right, the issues that are about relative to the economy and et cetera, like in the words of the president of ECOWAS, Mr. Jean, there are no country on this earth that you do not have this problem. Or how are this problem mitigated and solved? The collective effort of even the opposition and that of the ruling party. And this is the reason why this president has been magnanimous enough from the very beginning when he took over. He called the opposition, including my own instructor, that let us come on board to see how best you can bring our ideas together. And this government has continuously exercised that particular democratic willingness to accept the informed decision of giving the opposition to help.
Thank you.
But unfortunately, people are only geared towards satisfying their own personal political aggrandizement and not looking at the problem. If we have the protest today or tomorrow with the prices of rice, which is the basic commodity, be reduced to the anxiety and the wish of my own prof. If we have the protest tomorrow, will those issues be solved tomorrow? Are we not taking steps as the government to solve those problems? As we speak to you,
Thank you,
look at
Prince.
the issue of the bank. Today, the government has opened up that Liberians who are in the diaspora can send in a letter to see how best they can help.
Okay.
Is my prof willing to also contribute?
He will apply maybe, but thank you so much, Prince, for your contribution.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Thank you.
Mr. Joekai,
Right.
what are the next steps? The protest is held tomorrow. The protest is held on Friday. What happened Monday morning if the issues are not resolved?
And that's not a question I'm responding to first. I will respond to it after this one. Prince just outlined a little of issues. Let me say I appreciate his acknowledgement of me contributing to his foundation in terms of who he is today. I like the acknowledgement. But on the other hand, I share his anxiety and also in grief his indulgence as far as his understanding of the real issues are concerned. And I think he's being unrealistic about, judging me because a lot of things he said, he has no idea about them. I was member of the Unity Party government. I don't know the extent to which he was speaking, but I was always hired through vetting processes, and I've always provided technical support in institutions that I work for, some financed by donor agencies, and then some financed by the government. But I have never, and when you ask me why you are making the emphasis, very important. And that was one of the reasons why I said Liberians should start looking at who Dennis is, who Josiah is, but what they are capable of doing and who they align with, right? And if we continue to base our politics and our conversation on those personal issues, then we are not going to get nowhere with addressing the problems that confront us. And that's the thing, that's the angle I would want Prince to think from, With NEC, I work for NEC. And like I said, many of my activities are NEC because I work for NEC and I was working directly with donor agencies and providing support that was geared towards enhancing our democracy. I don't regret it. But I was never a commissioner. I was never one of those appointed by the political power that be. I was always appointed by panels comprising of donor agencies and technical people. So Prince, you got to get that off. That Joekai were the people who living in luxury and enjoying the taxpayers' money, root out. And people like to align people in that way. And they apply collective guilt. We have to get that out. That has to be ruled out. And thanks for the opportunity that I'm able to share that. But let me say this to Prince. I like the question you're asking. Why did he deviate from the existing issues? And he's talking about the ECOWAS leader talking about these problems are not peculiar to Liberia, but are African-wide or global issues. Hey, many of these statements from diplomats. I did international relations, my master's. I have a master's in international relations. Diplomats are people who just seek to solve problems. And any kind of way they can solve it, they seek to do it. The reality of the day is that what we tell we are in the background, they will not tell you in the public. But they will talk to him about the real issues that matter and try to assist him about how to address the issue. Such statement is intended to calm the situation, but they are aware that in keeping with our governance structure and our system of government, that protest is acceptable and that the Liberian people should be allowed to do that. That's what they have called on the government to guarantee that. That's why they are asking the government to provide security for that. That's why the AU is asking the government to do that. That's why the United Nations is asking the government to do that. So Prince should understand that there are issues that matter. It's not even about he, Prince. It's beyond him as an individual, because he can live wherever he is in the US. He can have access to everything he wants to do. But the problem in Liberia is about a larger group, the majority of the people, the little over 4 million people. It's about the security. It's about the image of the country. It's about the economy. Are they not real? Are they just issues that people are alarming about? The answer is a resounding no. They are not. And that's the context of the conversation in going forward. To your question that you just asked me about the protest. Let me be frank with you. When protests are held, the people don't expect a miracle to happen tomorrow. If you hold a protest today and you present your petition today and the government accepts your petition, the action of the government will tell the people that the government accepted the petition in good faith. The government will have to move to address the situation because she knows that tomorrow the people will protest again if those issues are not addressed. But let me tell you that in a governance setting, government does not allow the people to protest.
Exactly.
Government does not allow the people to protest. When the protest is taking place, it poses question to your credibility. It poses question to your legitimacy. I did a post on Facebook, and at the end of it, I said, for those who will need interpretation, the June 7 protest, trust me, Dennis, and I don't like to mince my words, the June 7 protest, if it goes ahead, it embarrasses we are in the government. It brings shame and embarrassment to them. It questions the legitimacy of the government. That is why the most important thing that any government, especially not a despotic government, not a dictatorship system, but a government that was democratically elected to allow the people to protest massively poses question to your legitimacy, because you are not the power holder. The power holder, that's the people. So when the people start to question you about the way you are handling their mandate, then it's a concern. It's a serious issue. So the government must not have a canopy. I will advise the government not to have a canopy. And the canopy they're using is the security canopy, that you cannot hold a protest because of the security concerns. In fact, let the people know that you are on top of issue. Let the people know that you are on top of issue to dispel one of the reasons why they are protesting, that there is security in the country. You must put your act together and organize your security in a way that the protest should go on so that you can dispel that particular position of the protesters that there's insecurity in the country. You have to do that.
I like that point. I like it's like
what Liberians don't like is objectivity. When you begin to speak the truth to power, they are not used to practicing that speaking truth to power. They are used to serving as griots, as people who are praise singers of government, and it affects them. They praise sing the leader, they praise sing the government, but they are the one having the pinch of the economic realities. Now, it's to speak to WIA. Nobody said go and take WIA down. WIA is aware. They show him that. They have told him.
Thank you, Mr. Joekai. Yeah, that has been part of our history. I want to really appreciate your time, and another guest who have been here, but due to some circumstances, he was not able to. But we want to appreciate the time you took. We want to appreciate all our callers and all the guests, those watching by Facebook. Want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tomorrow, this is an extraordinary or a special edition. Tomorrow, we're going to begin our series on the Liberian Civil War. Our first guest will be two journalists who cover the war extensively. The following Sunday, we're going to speak to victims and survivors of the Civil War. And then we're going to speak with those who actually held conferences to bring peace to Liberia. You don't have to miss that. But once again, want to say thank you so much for joining us. From all of us, my guest relations manager, Stephanie Setro, my co-host, Danielle knuckles-guishard, and my guest co-host, Mr. Fidel C.T. Budi. Want to say thank you so much, Mr. Joekai. Thank you also to all our listeners. From me to you, we say thank you and have a good night.
Thank you and welcome anytime. Yeah.